Secrets of the Vatican. What the secret archives are hiding. The Vatican, a city within a city, a place of immense power, faith, and history. But beneath the golden ceilings and behind the ancient stone walls lies a place of incredible secrecy. A library so vast it's measured in miles. It's called the Vatican Apostolic Archive, but for centuries everyone knew it as the Secret Archives. It holds the letters of kings, the confessions of heretics, and the private records of popes, stretching back over 1,000 years. Most of it has never been seen by the public. It makes you wonder what they are so desperate to keep hidden. Before we dive into the darkness, I have a question for you. What do you think is the single biggest secret the Vatican is hiding? It could be anything, from something historical to something completely out of this world. Let me know your theory in the comments down below. And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe to Whispered Unknown and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the shadows. Now let's unlock the doors and see what secrets are waiting for us. The very name Vatican Secret Archives sends a shiver down the spine. It sounds like something from a thriller novel, a place where the world's darkest truths are locked away. For a long time, the name itself was a barrier. The word secret in this context comes from the Latin word secretum, which more accurately means private or personal. These were the Pope's private papers, not meant for public eyes. But over the centuries, as secrets piled upon secrets, the name took on a much more sinister meaning. In 2019, the current Pope officially changed the name to the Vatican Apostolic Archive, probably to make it sound less mysterious and more academic. But nobody is fooled. A name change doesn't erase 1,000 years of secrets. To understand the scale of this place, you need to picture it. It's not just a single room with old books. It's a massive complex with over 50 miles of shelving. 50 miles. If you were to lay all the shelves end to end, they would stretch from one city to another. On these shelves are an estimated 35,000 volumes and millions upon millions of individual documents. Some are written on delicate parchment, others on brittle paper. They are the collected memory of one of the world's oldest and most powerful institutions. Access is incredibly restricted. You can't just walk in and browse. You have to be a qualified scholar, you have to request specific documents in advance, and you are only allowed to see a few items per day. You can't even enter the archives themselves. You sit in a reading room and the documents are brought to you. Photography is often forbidden. It's a system designed to keep people out, to keep the information under control. The official reason is to preserve these fragile, priceless documents, but many believe the real reason is to control history itself, to decide what parts of the story the world gets to know and what parts remain buried forever in the dark. So what kind of things are actually in there? Well, some of it is surprisingly mundane. Administrative records, financial ledgers, letters about church appointments. But mixed in with the boring stuff are documents that could change our understanding of history, science, and even reality itself. Let's start with one of the most famous cases, a story of a brilliant mind against a powerful church, the story of Galileo Galilei. We all know the basics. Galileo, a genius astronomer, used his newly invented telescope to look at the heavens. He saw the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and the mountains on our own moon. What he saw proved that the Earth revolved around the sun, not the other way around. This was a direct contradiction of what the Church taught. The Church's power was based on the idea that God had placed humanity and the Earth at the center of everything. Galileo's discovery threatened that entire worldview. The archives hold the complete original records of Galileo's trial in 1633. Imagine reading the actual transcripts, the word-for-word questioning of this great scientist by the Inquisition. The letters he wrote, pleading his case, the official judgment condemning him. The archives contain the very document where Galileo, an old and broken man, was forced to get on his knees and publicly renounce the truth he had discovered. He was forced to say that the Earth did not move. He was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life, a prisoner in his own home for the crime of being right. For centuries, the Church tried to control this narrative, but the documents in the archive tell the real story. It wasn't a debate about science. It was a brutal display of power. It was about an institution that was so terrified of a new idea that it was willing to crush one of the greatest minds in history to silence it. What other scientific truths, what other inconvenient discoveries might be buried in those archives, just waiting for the world to be ready for them? Let's move on to another legendary group shrouded in mystery, a group whose fate was sealed by the Pope himself, the Knights Templar. The Templars were a powerful order of warrior monks, founded during the Crusades to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land, but they grew to become much more. They became incredibly wealthy, creating an early form of international banking. They owned vast amounts of land all across Europe. They were powerful, secretive, and answered only to the Pope. Their power and wealth made a lot of people nervous, especially King Philip IV of France. The king was deeply in debt to the Templars and desperately wanted their money. So, he devised a plan. On Friday, October 13, 1307, King Philip had every Templar in France arrested. The date is why Friday the 13th is still considered unlucky today. The knights were charged with horrific crimes: heresy, denying Christ, spitting on the cross, worshipping a demonic head named Baphomet. They were brutally tortured by the Inquisition until they confessed to these crimes, whether they were true or not. King Philip then pressured the Pope, Clement V, to officially disband the order. The Pope was weak and basically a puppet of the French king. In 1312, he dissolved the Knights Templar and their vast wealth was seized. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake, cursing both the king and the Pope from the flames. For centuries, historians have debated whether the Templars were actually guilty of any of the charges. Most believe they were innocent victims of a greedy king. The Vatican archives hold a crucial piece of this puzzle. It's called the Chinon parchment. This document was lost for 700 years, misfiled and forgotten within the archives until it was rediscovered by a researcher in 2001. The parchment is a record of a Vatican investigation into the Templars. It reveals that Pope Clement V actually found the Templars innocent of heresy. He absolved them of their sins and planned to reform the order, not destroy it. But he was too afraid of King Philip to make this public. He buckled under the pressure and sacrificed the knights to save his own skin. This single document, hidden for centuries, changes the entire story. It proves the Templars were framed, but it also raises more questions. If the Pope knew they were innocent, why did he let them be destroyed? What other papal decisions, what other moments in history were based on fear and politics rather than faith and justice? And what about the legendary Templar treasure? The archives might not have a map with an X on it, but they could contain financial records or letters that give clues as to where all that gold and all those holy relics ended up. Some believe the Vatican itself absorbed much of the Templar wealth, and the records of that transaction are a secret they would never want revealed. From warrior monks, we turn to a story of royal passion and religious revolution, the story of King Henry VIII of England and his desperate quest for a male heir. Henry was married to Catherine of Aragon, but she had failed to give him a son. He fell madly in love with a younger, captivating woman named Anne Boleyn. He became convinced that his marriage to Catherine was cursed by God, and he needed the Pope to grant him an annulment so he could marry Anne. The Vatican archives contain the actual physical love letters Henry wrote to Anne Boleyn. Reading them is like peering into the private heart of a king. They are filled with passion, longing, and promises, but the archives also contain the other side of the story, Henry's formal, official requests to Pope Clement VII for the annulment. The Pope was in a terrible position. Catherine of Aragon's nephew was the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, the most powerful man in Europe. The emperor's armies had just sacked Rome, and he was essentially holding the Pope prisoner. If the Pope granted the annulment, he would infuriate the emperor. If he didn't, he would infuriate the King of England. The documents in the archive show years of diplomatic maneuvering, of threats and pleas and legal arguments. There is even a massive petition signed by 81 English lords and clergymen begging the Pope to grant the king's wish. It's a huge, ornate scroll with all of their wax seals still attached, but in the end, the Pope said no. He was too afraid of the emperor. That single decision had monumental consequences. Enraged, Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church entirely. He declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England, divorced Catherine, and married Anne Boleyn. This act, known as the English Reformation, changed the course of British and world history forever. It all came down to a conflict between a king's desire and a pope's fear. The papers locked in the Vatican tell the human story behind this epic historical event, a story of love, lust, and the lust for power. Now we move into much darker territory, the 20th century, an era of world wars, totalitarian regimes, and unimaginable horror. And at the center of it, a pope whose legacy is one of the most controversial in history, Pope Pius XII. He was the pope during World War II and the Holocaust. His critics have called him Hitler's pope, accusing him of silence and inaction in the face of the Nazi genocide. They claim he was more concerned with protecting the church's property and political power than with saving human lives. They point out that he never publicly and explicitly condemned the Nazi regime for its atrocities against the Jewish people. His defenders argue that he worked tirelessly behind the scenes. They say a public condemnation would have only made things worse, provoking Hitler to retaliate against Catholics and making the situation for Jews even more dangerous. They claim that the Pope secretly instructed churches and convents across Europe to hide and shelter thousands of Jewish people, saving them from the death camps. So, which is it? Was he a coward and an anti-Semite, or was he a quiet hero? The answer, many believe, lies in the secret archives. For decades, the Vatican kept the records from his papacy under lock and key, refusing to let scholars see them. This refusal only fueled the suspicion that they had something to hide. In 2020, Pope Francis finally opened these archives. Scholars from around the world have begun to sift through the millions of pages of letters, reports, and internal memos. What they are finding is complicated. There are documents showing pleas for help from Jewish organizations from all over Europe, detailing the horrors of what was happening. There are internal discussions among Vatican officials about what to do. Some documents seem to support the idea that the Vatican was actively helping people. Others seem to show a disturbing level of diplomatic caution, a reluctance to rock the boat. One of the darkest secrets allegedly hidden in these files concerns something called the rat lines. After the war ended, many high-ranking Nazi war criminals, men responsible for the deaths of millions, managed to escape justice. They fled Europe and started new lives, mostly in South America. The rat lines were the escape routes they used, and it is alleged that some officials within the Vatican, using the Church's network and resources, actively helped these mass murderers escape. Men like Adolf Eichmann, one of the main architects of the Holocaust, and Joseph Mengele, the sadistic doctor of Auschwitz, may have been helped by people within the Church. The question is, how high up did this knowledge go? Did Pope Pius XII know about it? Did he approve of it? The files from his reign could finally answer these questions. They could either clear his name or condemn him forever as a man who, after failing to speak out against the murderers, helped them get away. This is a secret so dark it could shake the moral authority of the Church to its very core. Let's stay in the 20th century, but move from the political to the supernatural. In 1917, in a small town in Portugal called Fatima, 3 young shepherd children claimed they were visited by the Virgin Mary. She appeared to them once a month for 6 months, delivering messages. These appearances culminated in a public event called the Miracle of the Sun, where tens of thousands of people claimed they saw the sun dance in the sky. During her visits, the Virgin Mary supposedly entrusted the children with 3 secrets. The first 2 secrets were revealed fairly early on. The first was a terrifying vision of hell. The second was a prophecy that World War I would end, but that a worse war would begin if people did not stop offending God. It also predicted the rise and fall of communism in Russia. These were shocking enough, but it was the third secret that became the subject of intense speculation and conspiracy. Lucia, the oldest of the 3 children, and the only one to survive into adulthood, wrote the third secret down on a piece of paper in 1944. She sealed it in an envelope and gave it to a bishop, with instructions that it was not to be opened until 1960, because she believed the world would be better able to understand it then. 1960 came and went. The secret was not revealed. Pope after Pope read the secret and decided to put it back in the archives, saying it was not for our time. This silence created a firestorm of theories. What could be so terrible that the world wasn't ready to hear it? People speculated it contained prophecies of nuclear war, a massive asteroid hitting the Earth, or widespread apostasy within the Church itself, with a future Pope being an anti-Pope, or even the Antichrist. The mystery grew for decades. Finally, in the year 2000, the Vatican decided to reveal the third secret. The document described a vision of a bishop dressed in white who looked like the Pope, walking through a ruined city past the corpses of the dead. He climbs a hill and is then killed by a group of soldiers who fire bullets and arrows at him. The Vatican's official interpretation was that this vision was a prophecy of the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. He was shot, but he survived. For the Vatican, the case was closed. But for many people, this explanation was completely unsatisfying. It just didn't seem to match the hype. Why would they hide a prophecy about an assassination attempt that didn't even succeed for 40 years? Many believe that the document released in 2000 was not the full secret. They point to inconsistencies. The vision released was written on a single sheet of paper. But people who knew Sister Lucia claimed she wrote the original secret on a different type of paper, and that it was longer. There are also claims that high-ranking cardinals have hinted that there is more to the story. The theory is that there are two parts to the third secret. The part about the bishop in white was real, but there was another part, a more terrifying part, that the Vatican is still hiding in the archives. This missing part is what truly frightens them, a prophecy of a future event so catastrophic that they dare not share it with the world. Is the real third secret of Fatima still locked away, a ticking time bomb of prophecy waiting in a vault? Let's dig deeper into the Vatican's alleged dark alliances. During World War II, the Nazi regime had many allies and puppet states. One of the most brutal was the Ustaše regime in the independent state of Croatia. They were fanatical fascists and ultra-nationalists who carried out a gruesome campaign of genocide against Serbs, Jews, and Roma people. Their cruelty was so extreme that it sometimes shocked even their German Nazi allies. During their reign of terror, the Ustaše looted vast amounts of wealth from their victims. Gold, jewelry, art, and cash, worth hundreds of millions of dollars in today's money. When it became clear that the Axis powers were going to lose the war, the leaders of the Ustaše regime packed up this treasure and fled. What happened to all that gold? This is where the story gets really dark and connects directly to the Vatican. According to a number of investigators and historians, much of the Ustaše treasure was smuggled out of Croatia and funneled through a network of sympathetic Catholic priests. The ultimate destination for a large part of this blood money, they claim, was the Vatican itself. The theory states that this looted treasure was secretly deposited in the Vatican Bank, the Church's notoriously secretive financial institution. The money was then allegedly used for a sinister purpose, to fund the rat lines that we talked about earlier. The Ustaše leaders and other Nazi war criminals needed money, fake passports, and safe houses to escape Europe. This stolen gold paid for their freedom. This is a horrifying accusation. It suggests that not only did some elements within the Vatican help war criminals escape, but they did so using wealth stolen from the very people those criminals had murdered. It implies a level of corruption and moral bankruptcy that is almost impossible to comprehend. The Vatican has always vehemently denied these allegations. They claim it's all anti-Catholic propaganda, but the rumors have persisted for decades. The United States government even conducted an investigation in the 1990s that found evidence supporting some of these claims, though it couldn't definitively prove the Vatican's direct involvement at the highest levels. The real proof, if it exists, would be in the Vatican archives and the records of the Vatican Bank. Financial ledgers showing large, unexplained deposits of gold in 1945, letters between Croatian clerics and Vatican officials discussing the transfer of assets, memos authorizing payments to help wanted men. These would be the smoking guns. It's highly unlikely the Vatican would ever voluntarily release such documents. If this secret is real, it's one they would go to any lengths to protect, a stain so dark it could never be washed away. So far we have looked at secrets that are, for the most part, grounded in our known history. power struggles, wars, and political intrigue. But now, let's step into the truly strange. Let's talk about things that challenge our understanding of reality itself. One of the most persistent and wild theories about the Vatican archives is that they contain proof of extraterrestrial life. Why would the Vatican have this information? Well, the Catholic Church is one of the oldest, most continuous organizations on the planet. For 2,000 years, it has had a presence in nearly every corner of the globe. If alien visitors had made contact at some point in our history, the Church would be one of the few institutions with the reach and the longevity to record it and keep that record safe. The theory goes that the archives contain more than just written accounts. Some believe there are ancient manuscripts from long-lost civilizations that describe encounters with star beings. Perhaps there are detailed drawings of spacecraft or artifacts made from unearthly metals. Proponents of this theory point to a few interesting clues. The Vatican maintains a very advanced astronomical observatory. The Vatican's top astronomers have been surprisingly open to the idea of alien life. They have publicly stated that believing in aliens does not contradict a belief in God. One of them even said that if they found aliens, they would be happy to baptize them. To some, this sounds like a very strange thing for a priest to say. To conspiracy theorists, it sounds like they are slowly preparing the public for a massive revelation. They are getting us used to the idea, so it won't be such a shock when the truth finally comes out. The most extreme version of this theory is that the Vatican doesn't just have ancient records, but has been involved in modern UFO incidents, that they have a direct line to world governments and are part of a global cover-up. Could the archives contain a piece of a crashed UFO, a biological sample of an alien being, or maybe even the full body of an extraterrestrial visitor, preserved deep in the subterranean vaults beneath Vatican City? It sounds like science fiction, but the archives are so vast and so secret, who can say for sure what's down there? If proof of alien life exists, hiding it would make a certain kind of sense. The revelation that we are not alone in the universe would be the single biggest event in human history. It would shatter religious and philosophical beliefs across the world. An institution like the Vatican might see it as its duty to keep such a destabilizing truth under wraps, releasing it only when they believe humanity is truly ready. From aliens in the sky, let's turn to a machine that could see through time. This is perhaps the most incredible and unbelievable secret said to be held by the Vatican. It's a device called the Chronovisor. The story of the Chronovisor comes from a man named Father Pellegrino Ernetti, an Italian priest and scientist who died in 1994. Father Ernetti claimed that in the 1950s he was part of a secret team of top scientists, including the legendary Enrico Fermi, who worked for the Vatican. Their goal was to build a machine that could see and hear events from the past. According to Ernetti, the device was not a time machine in the sense that you could travel back in time. It was more like a time television. It worked by detecting and decoding the residual electromagnetic radiation that every event in history has left behind in the ether. By tuning the machine to a specific frequency and location, they could essentially watch historical events as if they were happening live. He claimed they had successfully used the Chronovisor to witness major moments in history. They saw Napoleon giving a speech. They watched a Roman senator deliver a famous oration. Most astonishingly, Father Ernetti claimed they had used the Chronovisor to watch the last days of Jesus Christ. He said he had seen the Last Supper, the betrayal in the Garden of Gethsemane, and the crucifixion itself. He even claimed to have a photograph of Jesus' face, taken from the Chronovisor's screen, which was published in an Italian magazine in 1972. It's an absolutely mind-blowing claim. If it were true, it would be the single greatest invention in human history. It could solve every historical mystery, prove or disprove every religious text, and change our understanding of everything. But is it true? Most people quite reasonably think it's a hoax. The alleged photograph of Jesus was later identified as being a reversed image of a carving in an Italian church. Before his death, Father Ernetti supposedly confessed that he had made the whole story up. But the story doesn't quite end there. Some believe that Ernetti was forced by the Vatican to retract his claims and discredit himself. The device was simply too powerful, too dangerous. Imagine what a government or a military could do with a machine that could see any event from the past. It could be used to find out any secret, to blackmail any leader. It would be the ultimate surveillance tool. The theory is that the Vatican, realizing what they had created, dismantled the Chronovisor and locked all the plans and perhaps the device itself away in the secret archives, never to be seen again. A technology that could reveal all of history's truths is now history's greatest secret. Finally, we come to what could be the most explosive secret of all, one that strikes at the very heart of the Christian faith. What if the Bible as we know it is not the full story? What if there were other books, other Gospels, that told a very different story about Jesus Christ, and the Church deliberately hid them? In the early centuries of Christianity, there wasn't just one single Bible. There were many different texts and Gospels floating around, used by different Christian communities. In the 4th century, a council of bishops and church leaders met to decide which books would be included in the official Bible, and which would be rejected. The books they rejected are known as the Apocrypha, or the non-canonical Gospels. Many of these lost Gospels have been rediscovered over the centuries, like the texts found at Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945. These include books like the Gospel of Thomas, which is just a collection of sayings of Jesus, some of which are very different from what's in the Bible. There is also the Gospel of Philip, which talks about Jesus' close relationship with Mary Magdalene, referring to her as his companion and mentioning that he used to kiss her on the mouth. And there is the Gospel of Mary, which portrays Mary Magdalene as a lead apostle, to whom Jesus gave secret teachings that he did not give to the male disciples. These texts paint a very different picture of early Christianity. They suggest that women held much more prominent leadership roles and that the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene might have been much more than just a teacher and follower. This is, of course, the central idea of books like the Da Vinci Code. The theory is that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married and had children, and that their bloodline continues to this day. This would mean that Jesus was a mortal man, not a divine being who was resurrected. It would completely undermine the foundation of the Catholic Church. The conspiracy theory is that the Vatican knows this is the truth, that deep in the archives they have not just copies of these known lost Gospels, but other texts that have never been seen, documents that state, in no uncertain terms, that Jesus was married. Maybe they even have genealogical records, tracing his bloodline through the centuries. For an institution whose entire existence is based on the divinity of Christ, this would be the ultimate secret, the one they would have to hide at all costs. It would be the truth that would set the world free, but bring their world crashing down. The secrets of the Vatican archives are a bottomless well of mystery. We have only scratched the surface. What about the correspondence between popes and world leaders like Napoleon, Lincoln, or Hitler? What about the full, unedited records of exorcisms performed by the Church? What about the financial records of the Vatican Bank, which has been at the center of so many corruption scandals? The list goes on and on. The archive is a monument to power, the power to preserve history, but also the power to shape it, to control it, and to hide it. For every document they release, there are a million more they keep hidden. We are only allowed to see the pieces of the puzzle that they want us to see. The full picture, the complete truth, remains locked away, buried under miles of shelving and centuries of silence. The secrets are kept not just by stone walls and security guards, but by a powerful belief that some truths are too dangerous for the world to know. The question is, who gets to decide? Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of one of the world's most secret places. Don't forget to tell me in the comments what you think the Vatican's biggest secret is. And if you enjoyed this exploration of the unknown, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss where we go next. Until then, stay curious and never stop questioning what's hidden in the dark.